hello, Dr. Blue. I'm here.
Great, thank you very much. And Amy Zimfer from EPA in San Francisco? Not yet. Rosheng, I heard you, right? SCAG?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. And my understanding is that Bill Quinn is not going to be here, but Devin Richards, maybe on the line?
Correct, yes,
Okay,
yes, I'm here.
great. And then Larry Rubio, Riverside Transit.
Good morning, Dr. Blue.
Good morning. The only other person that we think might be calling in for sure is Kristen, who has had to stay at home to deal with some issues. But since her location wasn't noticed as a participating location and she didn't provide the right paperwork on her front door, then she can just listen and not participate, unless counsel's going to tell me otherwise. Opening comments and self-introductions. Okay.
Dr. Lou, it's Amy Zimfer. I'm on the
Oh,
telephone.
hi Amy. Glad to know you've joined us. We'll be excited to hear your update if there's anything you can say or not say about a new regional administrator. We're going to go around the room and do introductions. Dr. Fine.
Philip Fine, Deputy Executive Officer at SCAQMD.
I'm Jill Wynot, Chief Operating Officer at SCAQMD.
Hi, I'm Nan Harold. I'm with OC Waste and Recycling.
Jackie Perlina, I'm with Air Quality Consultants.
I'm Mark Montes with AM International. I'm also an elected with the school board.
Bill Lamar, Executive Director of the California Small Business Alliance.
I'm Bridget McCann with WISPA.
Dan McGivney, SoCal Gas.
Lauren Nevitt, SoCal Gas.
Kurt Coleman, Southern California Air Quality Alliance.
Tyrone Turner, Dakota Communications.
And Scagliola at QOD.
Naveen Berry, Technology Demonstration Manager at SCAQMD.
Bill Long with General Counsel's Office.
Okay, great. That takes us to item number 2, which is the minutes. Mr. Lamar,
Hi.
how did we do?
Well, Ann did her usual superb job. I did have one question, and I didn't. Either I missed it at the meeting, and that's on page 3, the legislative update, the second paragraph starting in January 2018. And it's the legislative, it's about that legislative proposal on public noticing. And where it says, however, mailing paper notices would still be utilized if notification by electronic methods is not feasible or is requested. Does that mean, I didn't pick up the is requested. So does that mean that the person requiring public noticing has to make a request?
If they want a paper notice. So if we have your email address, I mean, this is what we're.
It'll be just like your SoCal gas bill. You can opt,
Yeah, you can
opt out.
Well, I think the default would be if we have your email address.
You're opted in.
You've opted in. If we don't have your email address, you would get a paper notice. Or if you requested the paper notice, you would also get a paper notice. That's
Okay.
what we're trying to do.
That makes more sense
Yeah.
to me. If you're really looking for cost effectiveness, then it should be up to somebody else to say, you know, I don't want that. I want the old-fashioned way or something.
Yeah, I mean, we're not asking that if we don't have your email address, we're not going to notify you. If we don't have your email address or any other electronic means, we will send you by mail. But we spend, is it over $100,000 a year postage?
Well, what brought this to mind too was last week's board meeting where there was concern about having a deficit budget, and so I think, you know, anything that you all can do.
$100,000 a year would be good. Or even
$100,000 here, $100,000 there.
Yeah, you might add up to real money. Any other corrections or questions, Bill?
No, it looked fine to me.
Okay, Bridget?
I thought everything looked okay except my name is spelled wrong.
Oh,
I'm Bridget McCann, not Bridget McCall.
we will correct that. I missed that.
It's okay.
Right.
I'm sorry about that.
Don't worry.
We'll make that correction. And with that correction, any other corrections, addendum, errata, anything? Okay, well, we will consider this approved, so we don't have to go through the roll call vote. I will dictate that it is approved. Unless there's any public comment over there, Mark. Agenda item number 3 is, actually, we're going to Amy with EPA and federal activities. So, Amy, what can you tell us?
morning, everyone. Thank you. I have a few things I want to report on the local front or the South Coast front. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are continuing to review the various attainment plans incorporated into the 2016 Air Quality Management Plan. Currently, our main focus is on the Sirius area plan for the 2006 PM 2.5 standard, and we're also reviewing the 2008 ozone plan. So we've been engaging with the staff on specific topics as questions arise. And then just moving to the national front, I wanted to share that we continue to work on a process to get process improvements in our review of state implementation plans. This has been directed by our Chief Operating Officer, Henry Darwin, and I wanted to thank Michael Kraus from the South Coast District for attending this workshop that we had in February, and he is continuing to be involved in those efforts. So I'm very grateful that we have a local, highly qualified air district participating in these national activities, this national effort. So we'll see where that goes. We have very direct directions right now to move pretty straightforwardly on the large number of backlog in the SIPs that we have. Then moving on to ozone designations, on April 30th, our administrator signed a final notice on the second and final round of designations for the 2015 ozone standard. And this completes our round of designations, including for the state of California. So the effective date of these designations will be 60 days from the publication of the action in the Federal Register. So that will likely be around the first part of July when those will become effective. It has not, to my knowledge, been published yet. So as expected, the Los Angeles South Coast Air Basin and Riverside County, Coachella Valley areas are being designated non-attainment. And the boundaries are the same as they've been for the 2008 ozone standard. In the final classification scheme that was published in March of this year, March 9th, 2018, we anticipate that the initial classification for the Los Angeles South Coast area will be severe 15 and Coachella as moderate. So we'll continue to work on these issues, and we could provide more detail, but in the interest of time, I think I'll move on to a few other areas of interest. Going along with the 2015 ozone designation, we did finalize the classification rules, as I mentioned, and we hope to soon be finalizing the SIP requirements rule, and this is what lays out the framework for the state implementation plans that will be issued. Okay, so then I see that the South Coast 2 decision is on the update on the litigation front. So if you have any questions about EPA's role there, I'll wait for that topic on the agenda. And then just lastly, technology advancement. The Diesel Emission Reduction Act request for proposal is now open. Proposals are due June 5th, and we anticipate awarding about $40 million in grant funding nationally. So we're currently accepting proposals for up to $2.5 million per grant. So I know that Phil and Matt are working hard to put together proposals for that. The other large pot of funding that we have for advanced technology and emission reduction projects is our Targeted Airshed Grant program. So as a result of the congressional budget that was passed at the end of March, this year there is $40 million available nationwide. That's compared to 30 last year. And we're in the process of finalizing what our request for applications will look like. But this is a unique one in that only the most polluted areas in the country can apply. And so we had a great call yesterday with the South Coast staff about some ideas there, and it's very flexible, and And so we're hopeful that we'll get some good applications. And then just in a related front, we just recently awarded the targeted airshed grants for last year. And South Coast received 2 grants totaling almost $6.4 million. And one of the projects is to replace 29 diesel and gas fueled shuttle buses at airports. And the second is to replace 79 old diesel fueled school buses in the LA Unified School District, and those will be with ultra-low NOx natural gas vehicles. So we're very much looking forward to that. And then Dr. Liu, you had asked about whether we have any information on a new regional administrator. I cannot give you a confirmed answer to that, but we do anticipate that it's imminent. So it could be very soon.
I met with Stephen John yesterday, and he was checking his phone constantly, waiting for a text message telling that there was an announcement made. So.
That's right. That's right.
Still waiting.
Yeah.
We're still
I
waiting.
said to say we're putting briefing material together.
Yes, okay.
All right, so I'm open to any questions. That was my formal report.
Region 9, last but not least, with the regional administrators. Art.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. All I heard was a 40 million, but I didn't hear what it was for.
The targeted airshed?
Okay, yeah.
And there's DERA also.
Right.
So DERA is Diesel Emission Reduction Act, so that goes to try to reduce diesel emissions, and the targeted airshed grant is, like she said, a little more flexible as to what you can apply for.
Question with EPA. You guys have targeted a lot of the, see if I'm listening correctly, you're targeting mostly transportation, is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
Well, that's a problem. I can't hear you either. On this side of the table.
The question was whether you were targeting mostly transportation sources.
Mobile sources.
Well, for the Diesel Emission Reduction Act funding, yes, that is for vehicles, diesel
what about us?
vehicles.
Yeah, I'm an elected with a small district, and we basically school districts. As you know, we house about 30% of the population or more, and we come from disadvantaged districts. As such, I got some old. I believe I have one old diesel bus. I'm checking into it now. But it didn't meet the threshold this year for the district. And I'm not a big monster, and I don't have 96,000 employees like LA Unified to assign people to go for grants. What happens to those small rural districts or small urban districts? What do we do in this situation? Are we left out on the cold on the street, or what?
Right, thank you for that question.
Because I know this administration is real keen on helping us little guys.
I'm sorry?
I know this current administration is really very keen and aware of helping the little guy in disadvantaged communities.
Not the state.
So I would have 2 comments, and then I don't know whether, Phil, you want to pipe in here too, but first off, I would encourage you to continue to work with the South Coast District, and there may be opportunities to join in partnership. Additionally, we have provided funding through the California Air Resources Board, and they have targeted that to programs statewide for school buses. So we could get you in contact with the CARB, the California Air Resources Board folks that put those applications together. Those would be my 2 suggestions. You can apply directly, but given what you described in terms of the size of your district, it may be better to partner up with the 2 air agencies.
Okay. The other question is the biggest cost, we're right now passing a lot of bonds to upgrade our buildings, and the biggest cost that we're all incurring is the air conditioning units, HAVC. And then also updating a lot of our older to make them more efficient. And then also we're getting some solar grants. I got one from a co-op from Anaheim because I have 2 schools in Anaheim and in 4 cities. Is there any funding available at the federal level to help us? And I know the president was real big on making sure that no AC manufacturers went to Mexico, and to keep those buildings here and that manufacturing in the US. What is this administration doing in regards to helping us make those type of things more affordable for school districts and public entities to upgrade to more energy efficient AC units?
Yeah, so a couple comments there. Just first off, both of the programs I referred to, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act funding, which is focused on vehicles, would not apply for that. The Targeted Airshed Grant program is very flexible. One of the key criteria is demonstrated emission reduction, so I'm not sure that the air conditioning reductions would come there unless the efficiencies can be quantified. Having said that, Department of Energy does have a number of programs. I cannot speak to their specific budgets that they have this year. I know there were significant cuts along the way that the administration put forward, but they have a number of programs, and I would be able to get you in touch with their energy efficiency people if that would be helpful. But I assume the South Coast staff has that information as well. And
Yeah.
Phil, if you want to add in here.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like a homeless person here because I'm going from one referral to the other and I'm still not getting housed. What I'd like to see is pinpoint some funding for and if they don't have it, I'm asking now as not only as a member of this committee, but also as an elected official, that if we're gonna cut that footprint, then I need to have some type of assistance, or at least have somebody quantify to me what are the best energy efficient sources or products that are out there, because most of the school districts were all upgrading during the summer. And we're putting, I would say at least 20% of our budget is going into the AC units, either to replace them or to put in new units. So any help that you guys could help us with, instead of me as an elected or putting staff to search all this stuff out, if you could make that available to those authorities here that are managing the air quality, and then have staff make that available to us, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sure, I'd be happy to provide contacts at the Department of Energy and their energy efficiency program.
And I'm sorry for my sarcasm on regards to the administration's lack of diversity with
Phil, do
other
you know
countries.
anything
Thank
about energy efficiency programs at CEC or PUC?
I'm more familiar with what they're doing on the residential side than on the, say, schools or commercial side, but it's something we can look into.
I can also add, so SoCal Gas has a lot of energy efficiency programs for industrial equipment. Dan might be able to speak to more, but we do offer a lot.
Edison does too.
Yeah, and a lot of rebates, and they have the both utilities do, so.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah, because that way I could at least get, I got 9 schools, and then, combined with the network that I have, we probably have half the schools where we at least on the boards we can move that agenda forward. And I don't know if we're already purchased some of that stuff, but we got larger school districts and the ones that are larger impact. One was the 5th largest school district.
Lauren, if you could provide Art
I'd be
with
happy.
the information for at least SoCal Gas, and maybe Phil, you can find whoever might know about this stuff at PUC, CEC, and Edison, then at least you'll have
The
some
utilities
places.
might be a good starting point
Yeah.
for EV.
Yeah, like I said, we're getting 2.2 million from the Anaheim.
Okay.
I'm building a solar project. It's like 30 by 60.
So you're within the Anaheim?
I got 2 schools in Anaheim.
Oh, okay.
I got
And the rest are Edison?
I got 2 schools, and I got the rest are Edison, which I got 9 schools in Edison's thing. But with the changing of that in December of the rate change, that time rate change really messed us up because it doesn't now quantify the energy efficiency. So now I have to change the culture on my board to move the other one, where the other one we were able to get the money from because of that sale Anaheim with the co-op. We're able to pull 2.2 million into two sites, which are my most depressed schools. I got the largest homeless population, and I got from rich to poor, so I'm trying to make a balance from there. So any help that you all can give me,
Sure, yeah, I'll give you my contact information again.
okay, thank you. And you're nicer looking than the other young man that was here before.
Any other questions or comments for Amy? None?
Dr. Lu, this is Shen. I have a quick question for Amy.
Sure.
Yeah, Amy, you mentioned earlier that the SIP requirements for the 2015 ozones will be published soon. Can you tell me how soon, like end of this year, early next year?
Yes, I cannot predict. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. The
Yeah,
reason
I
is
wish
because...
I could be more specific, but I cannot.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Or member of the public back there? Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 4 with Johnny talking about CARB's regulatory activities.
Yes, hello, Dr. Lu and members of the Home Rules Advisory Group. I'd like to turn your attention to the control measure calendar, and so that was included in the packet. As always, a couple items that are coming up, particularly here in May. Consider approval of the 2016 PM 2.5 SIF for Imperial County. And also, we are proposing amendments to our consumer products regulation. So those are 2 items coming up here, and that sheet has additional items forward thinking into the future. A couple other things that I wanted to mention, our staff have been getting out there into the communities as part of the climate change investment funding guidelines meetings. And so it started there in the Bay Area. We had one in Los Angeles, San Bernardino, as well as we're going to finishing up one meeting here on Friday in Sacramento. They're receiving input for the funding guidelines, so if there's any ideas that you have, you can go to our website and submit comments there. In addition, in our climate change program, we have dairy and livestock work groups that have meetings here in May. One's focused on research and enteric fermentation. Others are focused on dairy digesters and then the non-digester category. And so those are occurring here in May. In addition, we are embarking on an effort to work with the Natural Resources Agency, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, CalEPA, and the Strategic Growth Council on putting together an implementation plan on how we quantify and account for carbon sequestration of our natural and working land. So that's coming up on May 18th. That'll be here in Sacramento, but there will be a webcast provided for that. And also for the dairy and livestock work groups as well. So if you're not able to attend in person, you can at least listen via the webcast. Those are the updates that I have. Are there any questions?
None here. Anyone else on the phone? Member of the public? Okay, that was a quick one. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dr. Lu.
Philip isn't here, so we're going to skip agenda item number 5 for now. And you can see, you're going to text him?
Yes.
Jill's here to text him to see if he
Make myself useful.
juggling all the phones that she has. But Bill Wong is here to give us an update on litigation items and related EPA actions. So let's do agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. I don't have any updates apart from the litigation status report that I filed, but I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you may have on the litigation status update.
No updates on litigation updates.
Slow month, huh?
Excuse me?
It's a slow month, huh?
Win some, lose some, right? No questions on agenda item number 6? Anyone? Going once, going twice? Member of the public? Oh, we're just blazing through here. Well, Naveen, this one will take some time, all right?
I can certainly provide a lot of additional details.
Item number 7, alternative technology infrastructure. Naveen Berry is going to lead us through the latest and greatest on charging infrastructure and other issues.
Thank you, Dr. Brewer. So I'm Naveen Berry, I'm the Technology Demonstration Manager, and I'm going to give a brief presentation with more details verbally on the EV infrastructure programs that the Southwest Air Quality Management District is directly involved with. And then I'll also give an overview of some of the upcoming funds that are going to be available to further support the electric infrastructure. I can just do this, right?
Hey, Naveen, can you hold 1 second?
Sure.
Just got a request from our member of the public. Go back to that last agenda item for a second. Come on up, Susan, just go ahead. Make sure.
I was too slow on the draw, but on case number 8, I think that's the reclaim shave.
Yeah.
Just kind of wondering, are there any next steps on that?
After the, and I had indicated in my report that there was an issue about whether or not we could continue, we could appeal the decision. The court basically issued the decision that because the last decision about the judge's basis that we could not proceed on because of it was an interlocutory judgment. The Court of Appeals upheld that, and that we could not continue to appeal that. So we are now in the process of deciding what to do after that decision.
Okay, like whether it needs to be reheard?
Well, the lower court's decision was that we had to have it reheard, and so we are now considering what to do after that.
Okay, thank you.
So there's no news, but there will be news eventually.
Yes, hopefully there will be news.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So this chart just summarizes some of the programs we've directly been involved with. The first two, the DC fast charging and the 321 level 2 workplace charging, were grants from the California Energy Commission that we implemented in the South Coast. And the remaining three, the remaining two, one, I'll talk about the workplace charging, the 92 level 2 chargers that many of you may have noted in and around our building were constructed, and now we're actually implementing some fees, and I can certainly get into that detail if you'd like, to charge those electric vehicles. And I'll talk about a program that the board adopted about 1.5 years ago on residential EV charger rebate programs, where MSRC and SCAQMD funds were commingled to provide these vehicles. So this is just a broad view of the level 2 and DC fast chargers that are part of our projects, and as you can see, they're distributed in and around all 4 counties. The orange are the DC fast chargers. Some of those are still under development, and I'll detail those as well. So this is one of the grants that we're actually in the tail end of finalizing, and it has EVgo as a network provider, Clean Fuel Connection as an installer, and then we also have an outreach component with a lot of the analysis and modeling work done by the UCLA Luskin Center. And just wanted to point out that attempt was made to distribute these along all over the 4-county area as well. The first one that went in was in Calabasas all the way up here, and we're in the process of, I think, deploying another 7 or so in the next month and a half. One of those will be actually at the SCAQMD headquarters as well, near the mushroom. Yes, sir.
Naveen, your earlier slide, your level 2 and your DC fast charging map, are those locations, I guess maybe there's a combination of both, are they located on private property, like local businesses, or on local government sites, like city halls, or
So
like that, or a
there's
combination of both?
So there's a combination of those.
Yeah.
Some are at the zoo and other publicly visited sites. Others may be located at the Credit Center, which is part of the city of LA, or they may be located at Mel's Diner, which is obviously a private institution.
Do you know what, I mean, it's like 50-50 or something like that?
I would say on the green
Is the
ones-
private sector participating in this, I guess?
I would say the green ones are, the level 2 chargers are probably about 50-50. The DC fast chargers, or whoever would take them at this point, because there's a lot of issues with the electric costs and operation and maintenance aspects of that grant as well. So I know that one's been a bit of a struggle to implement, especially when operational and maintenance costs come into play. So the EVgo has had a lot of detailed analysis on where they can go and who would cover the costs. So those are probably more on public facilities than they're on private. I'll give you an example that I'll get into the details, but Victoria Gardens was one of the sites. And it came to where Victoria Gardens, a private entity, would not want to put it on their site because of some of these issues. So we ended up working with the city and putting it on a city garage. So that's just an example of how these things balance out.
So I guess companies have to make that decision on way being a better environmental steward and absorbing the cost of doing that too, right?
Well, there's certainly the cost or the operational.
Are there tax
and maintenance costs play a role, and EVgo being a private entity will look at that particular aspect, and then based on some of the modeling and utilization, will make a decision as to how much they want to cover as part of their ongoing sale of electrons versus how much they expect.
Are they still a subscription service?
Yes, I believe so.
Are there tax advantages for a company to do that?
I would guess there are some mechanisms under like LCFS and other programs, but I don't know the details about the tax advantage.
I'm just thinking, you can appeal to private organizations, but there's something in it for them. It seems like recycling, it costs more to have your print job or something used on recycled paper, and it really should be the other way around, and it's hard to find that mechanism to do that.
Certainly a growing business case, an evolving business case from the developer's perspective.
Art, do you want to?
Yeah, I just have a brief question, because I just thinking right now, because I got solar projects going up, and we're repaving some parking lots as we're remodernizing a lot of the older sites that were built in the 50s and ripping stuff out. What's the general cost to put one of those? Imagine once you dig everything up and put all the points of connection, where there's you already got one point. It's just like putting another circuit just down the road and just put another unit there. What's the cost of setting something up like this?
So it can vary, and I wish there was one number. The EVSE or the chargers themselves, the level 2 like you see out here, the cost may be $3,000, $4,000 for a more robust, commercial level type of charger.
So it would take a while to get the money back, wouldn't it?
Yeah, cost recovery on level 2 chargers, it depends on when they're charging, how much they're charging.
And you gotta have enough units that are charged.
Yeah, so I'll get into that a little bit more as well, what we implemented.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's always are they cost efficient?
So if you, towards the tail end of my slides, I'll talk about what the Edison program is on
Okay.
It'll get into some of those issues, and then I can certainly address some more.
Okay, we'll just wait to get.
Yeah.
Hopefully you answer
You're
all
going
the
to get a
questions.
residential charger that you just plug into a 220 outlet for a level 2. Some of them are just a few $100. Depends on how many amps they are.
And I'll delve into that a little
bit
as well. So this particular slide just summarizes the level 2 chargers, and Bill, I think, this will address some of your questions, but really they're distributed all along the 4 county areas, Getty Center, Lake Elsinore, Diamond Stadium, LA Zoo. These were some of the sites that were chosen through a committee.
Is that Benoit with a mascot of some sort?
Yes, it is. Don't ask me what that is. I initially thought of the Clipper mascot. Yeah, but that's certainly,
That's your new
board
outreach
members.
mascot.
We're trying to improve outreach.
Are the
Put
bird
your
mascot of
eye
some
on
sort?
the
Yeah.
A Muppet, so.
That one's not it,
So basically, the idea behind this particular grant and implementation was to get what are the best charging practices and how to go about addressing some of those installation concerns. And really, the cost to install was all over the place, depending on the particular location. So the further you have to trench, if you have to do electric power supply upgrades at your facility, these are all ancillary costs.
I'm trenching already, so I'm already digging a trench. It's just a point. I just put another unit up.
So I'll get into
stub out. I mean, sometimes you just put the wires in.
That's I left stub out
device
10 years
later.
ago, 20 years ago on a lot of these sites.
So I'll talk about the Edison's program and their second phase of this charge ready program. And they have a fleet component as well, so, and a public and multi-unit dwelling component. So certainly we can get you in touch with the right party at Edison, and they can talk to you about some of the details of what you need to plan out now, and they'll do site visits. So I'll get into that. So basically, as I was indicating, we installed 92 level 2 chargers in our old building, and these are BTC chargers, the hardware itself, and they're all level 2. And the installation was completed a little more than a year ago, and last December we actually initiated charging a nominal amount or a cost associated with charging at our own buildings, and that's for the staff as well as the public. And
Yeah, I figured that out today.
But it's only, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Patricia, 6 cents a kilowatt hour, so it's less than half of what you would pay at home for nighttime
Does
charging.
the guy with the Tesla still come at night and charges his
I haven't seen it, but.
Model S?
We still
Charged
get,
a very low
well, since last March when these were implemented. Prior to that, we had 19, and we certainly had a lot of competitive aspects going on between the public and staff at 7 a.m. So that's the best way I can phrase it.
All right, go ahead. As long as you're not more complaints about us charging you 6 cents.
No complaints. Since you brought up Tesla, I'm surprised you guys haven't had Tesla installed any superchargers here. Do you guys have any relationship with Tesla?
We've spoken to Tesla and actually expressed our interest in putting the stations there, but they have not taken us up on our offer yet.
Wow. And you guys wouldn't have to pay for that, right?
Well, that's the issue. So because the Tesla charging mechanism is only for Tesla, for the most part, we're not going to put in public funds because it would be only available for a narrow subset of the market. So our DC fast charger that's going to be put in will be available for both components, which will be other. So that's the reason why we haven't put in cost share. And for the most part, Tesla may not know where Diamond Bar is. So no, but we've been certainly talking to them about utilizing some of the space either at our office or nearby to put in the fast charger networks, but we have not been successful.
Wow, that's surprising to hear.
So a couple other minor items on our own work class charging. We're also doing some cost analysis and looking at how to integrate some load management and demand response type of equipment so we can optimize our own costs associated with that charging. We can cut back on the charge rates if we're going to go above a certain demand charge area or peak response area. So we're certainly looking at that particular aspect as well. On the cost to charge perspective, we're going to do a 1-year data collection and do a comparison to see if there's a need to increase that more or not. Because some of our electricity rates are offset by our solar and others. So there's a lot of additional review on the data that needs to be done before we implement.
Bill has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What has, do you have any costs? And I know each installation is gonna be different, but what has been the cost of some of these installation of some of these charging stations?
So the installation cost for the deck parking, so you're familiar with our parking lot, and I'm sorry I don't have that slide here, but if you look at that deck parking, we had to do it all around the outside wall. And because they had to do the electrical infrastructure upgrades, the power supply upgrades, and put in very long lines to have power available all around the perimeter of that outer deck, it was a pretty expensive proposition, and I can't remember the exact breakdown of the cost, but when you looked at the mushroomer in front of the lobby, those costs were not as high because there was already electric lines available.
The reason I was asking that, you know, I bombed out miserably. Philip was offering $61 million here not too long ago on different things, and I asked my Sioma folks, you know, I thought this might be a great opportunity for some of them to put in an electric charging station. They've already got the gas stations there.
Right.
And, you know, there was absolutely no response whatsoever. And it was mostly because of the cost. And although I never did get a hard number, but I mean, it was all over. It was a healthy six-figure cost to them, and then a payback. But anyway, I was wondering if you had any.
So Patricia can correct me, but if I recall, the average number for installation was more than $10,000 for EBSC.
10,000 per installation?
At least,
per charger.
On average.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because if you have power available, then obviously the installation is not nearly as expensive. But if you do not have power available or the lines available, so it makes a big difference. We, in our own facility, had to go through power supply upgrades.
That's a lot less than the numbers that were given me.
So again, average number. If you really look at including in the transformer upgrades, connects, and all the other ancillary expenses, it can go up pretty significantly, actually, especially in the heavy-duty world. That's an area that we're really investigating a lot, and you know, the cost of ancillary components, trenching, power supply, can far exceed, can far exceed the cost of the EBSC, which the level 2 is probably on about $3,000 on average. DC fast charger, depending on what the charge rate is, but let's say a 65 kilowatt is probably in the range of about $30,000 on the upper end. But the installation costs can vary significantly.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of bottlenecks here to, you know,
certainly,
towards reducing emissions, but
we're still in a nascent stage of installing these and getting a much better understanding. But hopefully, in the next few years, we'll have a much better handle on what those costs would be. I think the recent CPUC decision and Edison's application being at least partially approved will give us much better handle on what that cost is for these variety of different things.
But, you know, as a policymaker, you know, I'm looking at it, you know, where you're piling all these regulations on people, whether it be the private industry or the public industry. And what I'm hearing from you is that, well, we'll get around to giving you more or less the cost, but we want you to implement these things. But I think if you're going to educate people, it's no different than the cars and everything else. When you're, if you're driving a smaller car, your electric car, and your gas bill goes from, say, $100 a week to $20 a week, then you see that cost savings, and you can make those decisions. So you have something to quantify that, to change the culture, change the policy, and then change the practices. So as a policymaker, it's hard if we don't have if we don't start seeing some type of concrete quantifiable cost, whether it costs to trench this much, it costs to put in a breaker this much, costs this. You should start getting those things quantified either for medicine and all the other stakeholders that are in there, for policymakers and others, and facilities directors to start looking and see, does it make it platable? Because if I may wanna put it on there, but if I got a 5-member board, I gotta count to 3. And I'm not gonna count to 3 unless I can get something on the table.
And I really appreciate that.
I mean, that's
we
a
go through
reality.
the same thing, and again, as we get involved with more and more of these, and ARB and others are starting to recognize these other ancillary costs being a big part of it, they're starting to recognize the need to provide infrastructure funding.
And something's
As a part of that.
sufficient, what works? You know, I don't need the Cadillac, I may just need just a small unit.
So it all depends. So for school buses, level 2 charging and overnight charging is perhaps the best and most cost-effective pathway because you have very established duty cycles. You know exactly when you're going to be going, how far, and back, and it's a daily routine, and they're all domiciled in one location. So overnight charging is probably the best approach, and that would then be a level 2 charger. But if you need to have like a drayage truck and you need fast charging capability, then you need to go to that.
Yeah, because like Bill, you know, he's talking to his constituents and his cohorts and others. And so if we have an idea and we talk to our facilities people, you know, this is what it's gonna cost for this type of site. At this other site, we may not be able to do it. So then we look at 4 sites and say, you know, this may be a better site because of the hookups and such.
So Art, what I'll do is I'll get Edison's recently almost completed Charge Ready 1 program results, and it'll have some costs, but the variability from site to site is hard to count.
We understand that. I mean, if I build it used to cost $8 million to build an elementary school 15 years ago, and now it costs $32 million. But the big thing is the soils. So if the soils require a different foundation structure, then that's going to add or another 4 million or 6 million or 8 million, depending on what I'm doing. We understand that, but if we have a basic cost of what the initial unit cost is, then we can take the site consideration requirements are different. But if we have one tangible cost that's fixed, then we can figure out the other one.
So I can certainly get you more tangible costs on the charger or the EVSE portion. The installation, as I said, is
that's going to vary
highly
from one side. Yeah.
So I can get you those costs. That's not a problem, and I'll get you costs on level 2 and level 3.
Okay, thank you.
So the other program, as I said, our board started about 18 months ago, is this residential EV charger rebate. And as opposed to the commercial or schools or other types of facilities, the residential charging program and the cost associated with it is really coming down. And right now you can get $250 or up to $500 if you qualify for low income under this rebate program. And we rewarded about a little more than 450 rebates to that of late April or April 20th, so we have some more already mixed. The cost of these residential chargers, and I have some photographs there, range from about $400 to $800. And they're as simple as being able to plug into a 240 volt or a NEMA outlet. So the installation part is not as complicated. If they can demonstrate to us that they have a 240 volt outlet that was already installed in their house, then we go ahead and issue that rebate. This particular slide just kind of breaks it up by county. As you can see, majority, more than 80% are in LA County and Orange County. And we're certainly trying to do some additional outreach with Riverside and San Bernardino County. One of the areas that we've seen growth is in the rebates for those counties based on now the longer range EVs that are coming out there, and GM Bolt being the prime one that is not only fairly low cost, but also has a 230 mile range. So we're starting to see some more activity in the Inland Empire as well. As you can see, we only have about a 9% penetration into low income EV adopters. We've leveraged the EFMP program or the rebate program for the vehicles as well in an effort to try to increase that. It's helped, but it certainly hasn't gone long enough yet. And the ESMP program allows for the charger and the installation, so they take advantage of that area more than under our rebate program.
But you're less likely to see EVs in low income communities, right?
So that's exactly why we're.
Family housing.
Well, you can't afford it, and then it's, most low income are rentals.
So that's why we're trying to emphasize or leverage the ESMP program.
Yeah.
So when they do their replace your ride, we can focus out to them that if for some reason they didn't qualify for the EV charger and the installation in that program, that we can help them under this program. So certainly an area we want to continue to focus on, but at this point we only have 90% penetration in the low income market, and yeah, there's a lot of different reasons. The other thing I just wanted to point out is bill under 2/3 are battery electric, and a little more than 1/3 are plug-in hybrid electrics. But the program allows for charging for both. Just again, some key highlights: the Bolt, the Leaf, and the Volt kind of dominate the rebates. Probably fairly representative of the car sales out there as well, but there are certainly some Teslas, both the Model S and more recently Model 3, that are starting to get some requests, and that's in this area. And I apologize if the footnote doesn't show it, but these are the Model X, the Model S, and the Model 3s that are starting to get some rebate applications. And for the most part, they're covering more than 50% of the cost of the Tesla chargers as well for a home.
One lucky person is driving a BMW i8. Damn.
I just have a question. There appears to be quite a few vendors that are doing chargers. And I know, at least I want to say I recall that when these battery or electric cars were coming out, such that the battery chargers weren't, consistently the same, right? So has that changed? Are all these pretty much the same and all the cars can plug into the same? Or is their manufacturers still have their own chargers?
So the home chargers.
Okay, so except for Tesla, they're pretty standard.
And if BYD ever comes into the market on passenger vehicles, they'll have a different charging system too.
But most of the home chargers actually have, and Tesla actually has an adapter, I believe, right? But they can take advantage of it as well. So on the charger front, ChargePoint, Clipper Creek, and Juice Box seem to be the primary product that's being purchased by homeowners. And now we'll get into some of the kind of upcoming opportunities. Recently, under the HVIP program and the Zero Emission Warehouse program, the California Air Resources Board, under their greenhouse gas reduction funds, is providing a very large amount. And the HVIP, the $180 million, is towards the vehicles, and I think up to $20,000 per EVSE if you take advantage of their electric buses or trucks. The Carl Moyer program, there's an announcement out, or actually the application process is open until June 5th. Electric vehicles are certainly eligible. So is the EVSE portion, where Carl Moyer will provide up to 50% of the cost of the EVSE and installation. The tangibles that Art was getting into, the trenching and the power supply upgrades, are really not very clearly defined. So our office will be looking at that kind of on a case-by-case basis. But right now, we know that 50% of the EVSE cost and installation cost, not including the trenching and the facility upgrades, is included in the cost.
Yeah, one of the things I was just looking at the cars, is I'm looking at trying to buy one. But all the electrical, as soon as you're going to buy green, it costs more green to buy it. And I was looking at the Volt. Have you looked at to see if it's because the pricing of the vehicles, or is that maybe a deterrent for minority communities and lower income communities? Because it becomes, we all can't afford Teslas. I mean, we don't all work for SCAQMD or somebody subsidizes it for us.
So,
because I see it when I go to affluent communities, I see the Teslas. I go to then I see a little Prius, a little Toyota there. Then I see the Cadillac and the Mercedes, and they use the other ones to drive around. So it's, what you can afford.
So the Volt sales are actually fairly high, and I don't.
What's the price range?
It's
Is
in the
that anything?
$35,000 range, and it has California Vehicle Rebate Program based on battery pack size. Rebates that are available in California, and then there's a federal tax credit that's also available for those.
For the low-income communities, there's a lot of lease and Volts that are coming off of 3-year leases that dealers are trying to clear out at pretty
Do we
low
get
prices.
let me ask you, because, in the southeast.
If you don't mind buying a 3-year-old car,
Well,
you can get, you can get a
what
Volt
you're-
for $12,000 to $14,000.
Well, let's take a look at
plus
the area that he
incentive money.
represents, that we work in, we worked in the southeast. High impact, a lot of used vehicles that come out of here. Do the rebates go back to that, because they come off the 3-year lease?
Yeah.
Can that rebate go back to
Yeah.
that individual?
Depending on how much, if it's all electric and you get low income and everything, you get up to $9,500.
Okay, what about the
toward a
settlement on the
car,
VW settlement?
$10,000 car. That hasn't been decided yet. That money isn't out yet.
Yeah, I'll get into what the VW settlement and what the board schedule is for that as well.
Yeah, because the ones that could take advantage of it, it's like those companies and those corporations that could take advantage of tax write-offs. You make a certain amount of money, oh yeah, you can afford to take the tax write-off. If you don't, you can't afford it.
So that's where the Replace Your Ride program that Dr. Liu mentioned
is
for
really
low-income communities is you can actually get a car for zero cost to you.
Yeah, some people have gotten cars for free.
And the Volt is a very popular model. The Leaf is a very popular model. You can go into Craigslist or other types of resale places.
Yeah. Another 2 years, you'll start getting the Volts there, right?
Yeah. And you're really getting them for probably 40% of their MSRP these days. So you can actually literally get a Nissan Leaf that's 3 years old, under $10,000, and be eligible up to $9,500 for the vehicle, and another dollar amount for installation and the rebate for the charger.
Because it seems like if you want to make an impact, and those communities are getting affected by the pollution, and that have the highest pollution, then you need to have an comprehensive education program to have those people be able to afford those vehicles.
So under our Replace Your Ride program, and that's not under me, so I don't know a lot of the real details, but we have a tremendous outreach mechanism through our contractors that go out into the field, into the actual program that emphasize, and then of course our public affairs office is out
Can you
there.
have the outreach program come and give us a talk on that?
Well, maybe we can just get the statistics, and maybe you could have them do that an action item for the next thing, is just have them give us the numbers of the breakdown for the Replace Your Ride program, what it's been for the last few years. It would be interesting to know.
I think it's still oversubscribed.
Yes. Yeah,
Right,
right.
so any dollar we get in goes out. I mean, you're
Well,
giving
what
away
is
cars.
oversubscribed?
It means more people waiting on the wait. There's a wait list.
Well, doesn't that tell you something? It seems
Yeah,
like
but we
need to
just
get
put
more
in an
money.
extra, how many million? Was it 20?
15 million
For
for the
15.
money that came from last year.
Yeah, so we put in 15 million recently to clear out that backlog, but I don't know, that's probably not been done yet.
But I can certainly talk to Fred.
Yeah.
And get,
You give Fred to just give us some data, that would be helpful.
And I think there's a new online portal also to facilitate, streamline the
Yeah.
application process.
Yeah, because, I think, those individuals on that leadership that make policy would like to know, if there's 15 million,
Just
you were
look
15 million short. then looks like
AQMD
you need
Replace Your
another
Ride in your search engine and take a look. You might be pleasantly surprised.
But it's a function of how many cars are coming off lease and by who.
They're out there.
It's the aging process of the
Yeah,
product.
go to cars.com or anything like that and just put in, Chevy Volts, and you'll see that they're, unbelievably inexpensive.
It's not limited to used cars, you can buy a new one.
Right, you can, if you have the money to pay the
What we're saying
rest,
is, for the used ones, it's almost covering or can cover the
whole
entire cost.
Yeah. It is, it's pretty remarkable. Certainly not enough people doing it, but it is pretty incredible.
And more and more funds are flowing in that direction, and the South Coast staff is continuing to put all the resources that we have towards that effort to get But I'll certainly, either
ask
work with Fred to get
Fred
that
to just give
summary
us some data.
as part of the minutes, or do
And then
you
we'll see
want-
if we want him to come in and talk about the whole program, but let's just get the information first.
So the Volkswagen settlement, I think, Art or Bill, you brought up, that's a pretty broad program and just kind of hitting on the different appendices that are part of this national investment plan, and, 10 billion of the 14 billion or so is dedicated just for the vehicle buyback and modification. 1.2 billion is for zero emission vehicle investments, and another 2.7 towards the environmental mitigation trust. And Appendix D is really where California will play a big role. And
Does VW have electric vehicle? I read something, I think it was one of the business journals, where they're gonna go to a heavy electric.
Yes.
So Volkswagen has had the Golf electric for the last 2 or 3 years. But they're starting to expand their lineup of electric vehicles, both in the light duty front and also.
Which one is theirs?
The Golf.
E-Golf.
E-Golf.
E-Golf, so be on this list here?
E-Golf. I don't know what the range is.
It's about 90, 95 miles, right, Bill?
You have one?
80 months, yeah.
80 miles.
Reliably 80 miles.
Is it on this list here?
It should be, yeah. There are not a lot of Golfs actually that have.
Bill has only one.
No, Matt Misato also had one.
Oh, Matt has one too?
Had one, yeah.
Had one.
So, let's see.
It's 14.
Soul, Spark. I have an i3.
You have an i3?
Oh, the E-Golf, there's 14 that
He doesn't have
are
it
taking
anymore.
advantage.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, 14.
So I forget what year it is. I think it might be 2021 or 2022. The VW van will be an electric version of that. So if you want to get back to your roots. My 12-year-old daughter was just asking for one this week. She goes, it comes out when I graduate, you could buy one for me.
The microbuses are really cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty. She didn't even get to see it. She just likes VW vans. And I said, well, you're not going to get a combustion vehicle. And I said, oh, but they're going to come out with an electric one. So then she got hooked on getting one of those. But that's my problem. It's not really.
So Audi is also a subsidiary. Audi has had the e-tron out for quite some time. And Porsche is announced, and I don't know when it's coming out, with the Mission E. So Volkswagen is certainly putting a big effort into introducing battery electric vehicles, and they've also now made some preliminary announcements on doing Class 7 and Class 8 trucks starting in Europe.
Volkswagen?
Yeah. So they're starting to look into the heavy duty sector as well for their trucks. Again, starting in Europe. So this slide just gives an overview of this Appendix C, where a lot of this is still in flux and it's a draft stage, but 75 million will be dedicated toward DC fast charging, 45 million towards community charging within LA, as well as some outreach campaigns. Appendix D is really where the main focus of Volkswagen's California plan is, and really they're looking at, out of the 423 million, about 130 million for zero emission transit, school and shuttle buses, another about 14% of that for combustion, freight, and marine, and really what that is near zero or tier 4 type technologies for heavy duty trucks as well as locomotives and other off-road equipment. We're also looking at about 70 million for zero emission freight and marine operations, and another 21% or 90 million towards zero emission Class 8 trucks. So those funds are kind of distributed out. Out of that, only about 10 million is dedicated towards zero emission infrastructure. And again, the parentheticals is how much they want to make sure that it's within disadvantaged communities. Many other areas that are also looking at EVSE investments. One is the ARF VTP, or the Alternative Renewable Fuels Vehicle Technology Plan. under CEC, and they're dedicating about $134.5 million for EV infrastructure. And that business meeting is actually going on right now as we speak, trying to decide on the staff's proposal on 2018-2019 investment plan. That includes that $134.5 million. This is main emphasis on light duty. They'll also consider incentivizing medium and heavy duty infrastructure for this. Another CEC program is Cali VIP. This is still in the draft stage, and $29 million will be dedicated to DC fast charging, mainly light duty focus, and is $600,000 per application, or $70,000 to $80,000 per equipment and installation costs. And that's a program that's still in the draft stage and under development, and certainly something that the Southwest SCAQMD's technology group will be monitoring very closely. This is a program I was referring to under Edison's Charge Ready program. The phase 1 is pretty much completed, except they've expanded or added some more funds for the multiple unit dwellings or apartment buildings and such for those. Phase 2 is looking to start in the next few months, I believe. I think the last time we met with them was about a month ago, and they're trying to get everything approved internally before implementing it, but they're looking at DC fast charging for workplaces as well. And this is a contact that we'll get you, so you can have them do a walkthrough and see how the school district can play a role in taking advantage of some of these programs. So they'll do a stub out, they'll put in the EBSE for you if you meet all the requirements that they're considering.
Have you, Naveen?
Yes.
Have you had any luck, or do you plan on approaching the municipalities like LADWP or City of Anaheim or Pasadena, Glendale, Burbank?
What do you mean approaching them? They have their independent programs.
Oh, they do,
yeah.
just like Edison does.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm just gonna kind of, give you a verbal update on those, but they do have similar type of programs, especially LADWP more than the smaller municipalities. I believe Pasadena and Glendale actually had a home charger rebate program that's been phased out, and I think they're working towards adopting a newer one. And Anaheim, I'm not sure about actually, but LADWP, well, that's my last slide. LADWP actually has a program that they renewed about 8 months ago, maybe, where they provide a $500 rebate for a residential charger rebate and up to $4,000 for a level 2 charger at commercial or multifamily development. Yes.
Quick selfish question. Can you layer the DWP or Edison rebates with South Coast rebates for home use?
No.
Okay, so it's one or
because
the other.
we think that the program costs are set
Just
up.
curious.
No, the program costs are set up
Okay.
to where it's covering either 50% or almost 100% of the cost of the home charger.
Yeah, $500.
What we will do though is, because there are certain parameters within LADWP's program or Edison's program or others, if for some reason you don't qualify under those, but you qualify under ours, we will then, as long as there's a rejection letter from one of these entities, then we'll go ahead and see if you qualify under our program. And we have a pretty easy to complete online application with minimal requirements to put in. Basically, we want to know what car you have with a valid registration, your utility bill to verify low income or at least usage within South Coast.
You're not driving a low Bronx semi-truck?
Classy.
Yes.
Yes. It's a 12 liter. That sits in the parking lot.
You can layer the car rebates though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the infrastructure rebates.
Okay. Any other questions for Naveen? Comments? Member of the public? Might not give you a second chance this time. Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Naveen. That was very helpful. We're going to go back to item 5, I believe it was, right?
Yes.
Legislative update?
Yes.
Okay.
I apologize for arriving late.
No problem. You had to sit through the educational period.
Exactly.
Good for it.
And so we had a legislative committee meeting on Friday, April 13th, just recently. We have our next one coming up, well, it was going to happen on Friday, but actually it's been canceled for this month. We won't have another one until June. But there was an update on federal issues, and one of the things our committee reported on the 2018 Omnibus Spending Bill, which was passed recently. It was stated that the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, or DERA program, received $15 million of increase for that year, from $60 million to $75 million for the nation. And the Targeted Airship Grant program received also a $10 million increase from $30 to $40 million in FY 2018, and also nationwide. It was also commented that US EPA determined that greenhouse gas emission standard for model years 2022 to 2025 for light-duty vehicles should be revised, and the EPA filed a Federal Register notice addressing the CAFE standards, and this will start a new rulemaking process. It was noted that there are some implications for the California waiver, since under the Clean Air Act, California is currently able to set its own standards. So we'll see how that continues to play out, but we're definitely taking an active role in that.
I would add, since that time, there's a lawsuit that's been filed too by a number of states in California.
17 states.
Yeah, and the NBC.
It is also reported that the Senate confirmed Andrew Wheeler as Deputy Administrator for the US EPA. And President Trump named Heidi King to be the next administrator for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is an agency within the DOT, or Department of Transportation. However, she will still need to go through the confirmation process, and there's obviously no guarantees on that. It was also remarked that there was a memorandum from President Trump issued April 12th directing the US EPA Administrator to reform the National Ambient Air Quality Standard Program in a way to make it more efficient and cost-effective. So lots of activity at the federal level that are relevant to us, obviously. It was also reported that the President was in the press recently regarding a rescissions package targeting up to $60 billion from the recently passed omnibus bill that would potentially slash foreign aid as well as non-discretionary domestic programs. It was also stated that US EPA granted 3 Southern California tribes approval to implement water and air programs under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. That's the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in Riverside, California, and 2 tribes from San Diego. On the state side, there was an update given on AB 2548 by Assemblymember Friedman that was regarding a community benefit program. This bill initially made reference to SCAQMD being involved in the administration of the program, the creation of the program, and also it conflicted with our current Rule 2202 that has its own community benefit program and much more extensively. That's what's being proposed by this bill. The bill has been amended and no longer mentions SCAQMD and does not conflict with SCAQMD rules, as we provided amendments with to Assemblymember Friedman's office, and we've been working with the author and with the sponsor, which is LA Metro. Additionally, SCAQMD staff has had multiple meetings in Sacramento on numerous issues, but specifically on AB 617 implementation funding needs, which is the key. It's an unfunded mandate at this point in terms of what's been required by the state, and also the need for funding for incentives to support the AQMP in this year's budget to mitigate air pollution. There were some action items. There was 4 action items by the committee also, taking positions on bills and other things. So AB 2091 by Assemblymember Grayson is regarding fire prevention and prescribed burns. This bill will require things like the word prevention to be added to the name of the State Board of Forestry and Fire Prevention and Protection. Will require at least 1 board member to be selected with a background in fire prevention, including prescribed fires, and require the board to appoint a prescribed fire advisory committee, which would include 1 local air district representative. And overall, this bill obviously could have a positive effect on reducing air pollution within the South Coast by facilitating use of controlled burns to reduce wildfires and reduce the resulting severe air pollution. But there was also recommended amendments to the bill that would address an issue that complicates the granting of controlled burn permits at the local level. Current law only allows an air pollution control officer to permit controlled burns or equipment in counties with a population of 6 million or less. This provision complicates our ability to issue controlled burn permits for fire hazard mitigation, particularly in Los Angeles County, which has a population that far exceeds 6 million. So staff proposed an addition to the bill that would remove that current reference to the county population, and we're working with the author and it looks like they will be taking our amendments. We had a meeting on Monday actually with them, so we're moving towards that, but legislative committee did adopt a support with amendments position on that bill. Also, there is AB 2453 by Eduardo Garcia. That's regarding air pollution in schools. This bill would authorize modernization grants from state school facility bond funds to be used to limit pupil exposure to harmful air pollutants by updating air filtration systems, among other things. It would also provide that schools located in those communities with facilities identified under AB 617 as toxic sources may work with the air districts to provide, to identify school sites for air quality adaptation efforts, and provide that schools located near a facility designated by an air district as a high priority category might be eligible for grants as part of the community emission reduction programs that would be adopted under AB 617. So staff has recommended working with the author to identify more effective ways to implement air pollution mitigation efforts on impacted school campuses. Also recommending that this other source of funding, modernization apportionments, be used for installation, not just upgrades of air filtration systems. Also, staff recommended that there was a clarification in the bill that does not limit the authority or the discretion of the air districts in developing and implementing the community emission reduction programs under AB 617. And the last thing is for staff recommended clarifying what types of grant funding sources would actually be applicable for funding these air pollution mitigation efforts. Since AB 617 does not really provide specific funding for grants as part of the community emission reduction programs. The legislative committee adopted staff's recommendation with a support with amendments position on this bill. The third and final bill is SB 210 by Senator Connie Leyva. It's relating to state vehicle fleets and near zero emission vehicles. This bill would authorize CARB to basically develop and implement a heavy-duty vehicle inspection and maintenance program for non-gasoline, heavy-duty on-road vehicles, gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000 pounds or more, but not limited to, it would include but not limited to single vehicle fleets and other vehicles that are registered in another state and operate in California. This would essentially be a smog check program for heavy-duty diesel trucks. And the program would require motor vehicles to pass test procedures in order to register and operate in the state. This is an effort to basically not just control the in-state trucks, but also all the trucks that are coming from out of the state. The bill states that the program shall be developed in partnership between affected state agencies, the public, industry, and other stakeholders, and is intended to be developed in a way that would minimize costs to truck owners and fleets and provide a level playing field for the industry through effective enforcement. So the committee, after discussion, agreed to recommend proposed amendments to the bill that would center on clarifying and potentially changing the non-gasoline terminology in the bill, basically just to ensure that clean vehicles are not affected by this bill. Since it does say non-gasoline, that could technically include electric or hydrogen fuel cell or things like that. So making sure that that is not affected. And to seek to have a portion of the fees that are going to be generated by this bill's proposed program to be directed to local air districts to help reduce air pollution caused by trucks, et cetera. Overall, Leg Committee recommended a position of support with amendments on this bill. And the last item that was taken up was proposal to amend SCAQMD's 2018 state and federal legislative goals and objectives. On the federal side, after some discussion, staff proposed language that would add the following to the federal legislative goals. That would be to oppose legislation that conflicts with the district's attainment goals. The legislative committee agreed to adopt a support position on that item. There was one other item relating to state legislation, proposed amendments to the state goals and objectives regarding clean energy goals. However, the Leg Committee did not recommend adopting that change. And that's my report for the Leg Committee.
Question on the labor bill.
Yeah.
Did staff's recommended amendments also seek to exclude the ultra-low NOx engines? Or is it just electric and hydrogen?
No, it's just to seek clarity on the non-gasoline terminology with the goal of making sure that, cleaner vehicles in general are not, put through that process.
Okay.
But basically, there's a current standard for gasoline heavy-duty vehicles, kind of like a small check program for them. So that's likely what the author was going for, is just say non-gasoline and get the rest of the groups involved. But this would be a CARB rulemaking, so most likely those types of clean vehicles would be excluded, and this wouldn't be necessary to focus on.
Bill?
Yeah, Philip, don't know if you're the right person, but anyway, piece of legislation, AB 1132, that was signed into law, I guess, in January on interim abatement orders. That provides for an air control officer, air district control officer, to with I guess an endangerment finding, to close a business down. Has this agency done that this year?
No.
Okay, not yet. And
Do you have any recommendations?
I don't know. And on a lighter note, I was wondering if this district plans to enforce acrylamide or monitor for acrylamide, all Starbucks and everything like this for coffee, now that it's a.
Oh, we could start with Dan and take over the.
It's gone now, I drank it all, so there's no more emissions.
Oh, we'll just put you in the.
Well, I'm glad to hear on the other one.
Not that I know. So I discovered this week that I know that ARB has existing rules and regulations for heavy duty trucks, and they have an inspection program. And I asked my Coalition for Clean Air staff in Sacramento, who are going to a workshop or briefing on it, whether the CHP has authority to test and enforce those regulations. And I knew they didn't for the idling. Well, they do, but they don't do it because it's not in the vehicle code. It's in the health and safety code, and they don't read the health and safety code. And I discovered that the way it works is CHP will pull over the trucks, but they have to have an ARB inspector there to actually do the enforcement. And police, aren't involved at all, ever. So it made me think that I mean, in one way, I'm not surprised they got 30% non-compliance with a particular filter regulation, but that enforcement for the labor bill and for these other things at ARB is probably as important, if not more important, than what the authority is and the regulations they adopt, because I don't think they have sufficient number of inspectors, and I don't believe that we have an agreement to do the enforcement ourselves. So the only people who are doing the enforcement are the small group of ARB inspectors who are dispatched throughout the state, and it just doesn't seem to me that is the most effective way of really making sure people are complying with the program.
Right.
So I'm just going to plant that seed for now. Maybe we'll talk about it some other time. Bridget.
I just had a quick question. Has SCAQMD received any feedback at all from the governor's office about the coalition efforts for funding for 670?
Well, it's been primarily in the governor's budget. It was zeroed out from last year versus
May
this
10th
year.
is tomorrow.
Yeah, the
We might have a
May
better
revised
idea.
budget will come out tomorrow, or on Friday, actually.
Friday.
Yeah,
Oh, it's Friday?
Friday.
Yeah,
Oh, so now May 10th is not May 10th anymore?
It's still, it's May 9th. I
I've
know
been
it's May 9th,
told
that's my birthday.
it's probably not, you're not gonna see, well, hopefully we'll see something, but don't expect anything at that point.
Really?
But that doesn't mean it's dead.
Yeah.
The legislature is trying.
The primary conversations have been with the legislative leadership, which will obviously, the governor puts out his budget, then the revised budget, and the legislature negotiates with them. So a lot of the conversations have centered with legislative leadership, but we'll see on Friday if there's any movement from the governor's office on the budget on that issue.
But we've been actively meeting with, not just in the not just the governor's office, but also Assembly and Senate side for months now.
Right.
Yeah, I thought the expectation last year was that we weren't gonna have to fight for this money every year.
That is what we tell
That's
them,
the expectation.
as we're fighting for the money every year.
That's just, the governor's budget has money for ARB.
That's nice.
So
They hired like 90 people, didn't they? Well, they had
70
70.
something,
70,
50 something full-time and some other provisional ones for shorter time, so. So they have a lot of staff to do work and a lot of staff to oversee, but we're
Will
making
they
it
do
very
our work?
clear that, no. We're making it very clear that we need the sustained funding, so that we can staff up and be ready to implement this program, otherwise it's not gonna fulfill the expectations.
Besides, I mean, I think we're making progress in the legislature, but anyone who wants to help, am I allowed to say that?
Well, Coalition for Clean Air is actually honoring Speaker Rendon a week from Friday. I just would not be surprised at all if this issue happens to come up in the conversation. Art.
So what is it, I'm just trying to do the clutter. What is it, what funding's in jeopardy or?
So, AB 617 that was passed last year has a whole bunch of different provisions in it, including monitoring, data reporting, the establishment of identification of just highly impacted communities or
Community emission reduction.
and then the establishment of best available retrofit control technology requirements and deadlines, and then the creation of community-specific emission reduction plans. And so all of that is being done with the Air Resources Board, and implementation is being done by the Air Resources Board and the local air districts. And it costs money to do. So the question is whether or not the local air districts, us being the largest of all of them, will have the money to do it. There was money in last year's budget. There is proposed zero money in this year's budget. So there's a conversation going on.
So, looking at it from those communities that are impacted. And
there's also a community grant program.
Yeah, and because one of the other things that I was kind of disappointed in, and I talked to Rendon, was, we had looked at the cap and trade monies, and some of that money went to the bullet train,
yes,
pie in the sky, and then the rainy day fund, and yet there was a bond that was, they pushed a bond in Rendon's district for that light rail system or the
for downtown.
Yeah, for those things. And that financial burden went on that community that's trying to implement things to clean up their own air, but they're being impacted by other communities and other land use decisions that were made prior decades to them. So to me, the argument would be that if it would be that what is the AQMD doing? If I'm an elected, what are they doing for my community? How are all your staff here helping me and cutting those health risks to the community and constituency that I represent? And why should I give you more money? And why should it sustain you? I can see it in overall health, but one of the things that I'm looking at right now is sustaining those programs that I have.
Right. So the key is that the district has funding to hire the staff to actually do that for the communities. What happened last year was that our district and others opposed the legislation because there was no money for that. It was an unfunded mandate, and they said they couldn't afford to do it. It, I believe, irritated the governor quite a bit because he was trying to push that and the extension of the cap and trade legislation through as a package. But in the end, there was money appropriated for that purpose through a different bill.
For 1 year.
For 1 year.
Or now they're claiming it was 2 years.
Without that money, right, now they're trying to say that 1 year money was 2 year money. So without that money, the district might not do anything to help those communities. But with funding, how many staff? 36?
36.
36, hiring 36 staff members to focus on the most impacted communities to try to find ways to alleviate the cumulative impacts that they're burdened with.
Because it sounds to me, it's almost implementing a down type of culture that's being implemented at the federal level. And, you know, we're supposed to be the last bastion of some type of environmental progressives, and yet we're not willing to fund what we're saying.
Well,
So I mean,
it's
that
not-
you can be progressive.
it's not June
I have
15th
progressive
yet.
thoughts, but I'm not
So
putting my wallet on the table.
The budget hasn't been finalized, and you know how those decisions are made. It's normally the governor, the speaker, and the president pro tem get in a room and figure it out. So that's going to happen at some point.
So what's your budget that you're asking? What's the
The
difference?
last year, there was 27 million appropriated for the whole state, right?
10.8 for us.
We
And
got
10.8.
10.8.
And 10.8.
The new estimates are 75 million, for ongoing essentially, 75 million statewide. And we're like 25 to 30 million.
So how does it affect the memorial programs and the bus programs and the other programs?
That's
Separate.
separate.
But does that mean I don't have anybody to come and yell
No.
to that I want money for, or help me out, or what is that?
It's separate efforts.
Separate
There's
efforts.
HQP support and there's AB 617 implementation.
And there was
So
also
two pots.
community-based organization grants, the application deadline just passed, in which communities working with others
They won't get the money,
have submitted proposals to get funding to do a variety of different.
so they won't get the money.
I don't know how much money was submitted for proposals. I'm sure that it was way above and beyond what.
So
what they have.
it'll be those communities that, I'm looking at the 5 people that
I
are
don't
sitting in the
know,
room.
if in the budget, is there community grant money again for this year, do you know?
Community grant money for
For AB
For communities?
617?
I don't
I don't
think so.
Really?
But
Wow.
there is 250 million, just like last year, for more, could be Moyer type
Could be Moyer.
programs.
Well, I'm
And there's-
gonna be a political monster, so I look at 5 people in the room. And I'm looking at least 2 or 3 coming from those communities that get impacted.
Mhm.
So I can count to 3 out of 5. So what's the
And-
issue that you can't
And
convince?
school districts can apply for that community money. I know because Coley for Clean Air was part of a proposal for Riverside Unified School District to get some funding.
Why can't you count to 3?
Me?
No.
I have to count to 7. I don't know about
No,
you.
but I mean,
You get to count to 3, I have to count to 7.
you count to 4, right?
No, there's 13 board members on our.
13 board members.
13 board members. You have to have 7 votes to do anything. So that's a different number for me, but that doesn't matter.
Same principle.
What I think you might want to do is just take a look at the ARB's AB 617. They call it the Community Air Protection Program. You look up-
What is it?
617. But the Community Air Protection Program, just Google it, go to their website. The website is actually pretty informative.
And there's a governor's proposal. It does it with the $250 million proposed this year. There still is that $5 million.
Oh,
it
for
isn't.
community
Oh,
grants?
yes.
It's part of the 5.
Yeah.
It's
Part of the 5.
What's
So
250?
there's
I
5
thought
M,
it's like last year.
available to the communities.
So there's 250 million, and of that 250 million statewide, 5 million is designated to community grants.
And is that 5 statewide? I have to
Yes,
divvy up.
Statewide.
Statewide.
But they had a request for proposals that closed a month ago.
Right, but
for this
if
year.
the money goes in for next year, then we'll go through that whole process again.
Right.
And in 10 or 11 months, you'll have another deadline for
And
proposals.
another budget.
But that's how long it takes to put the proposal together, so you might as well start thinking about it now. I mean, seriously, it's actually a very good opportunity.
Well, I gotta talk to the leadership the next few days, so,
But, yeah.
because I got a lot, look at my stuff. But, you tend to be selfish when you look at the table, everybody fighting for the same boat.
Yeah. That's been pointed out, that this program kind of pits the different environmental justice groups against each other competing for funding, but it's the way it goes. Lauren?
Quick question, so for the 250 that's been proposed for next year, for AB 617, would it be proposed to be split along the same lines, like listed 107.5 going to South Coast?
No.
This hasn't been decided.
It
I
hasn't
think
been
there's a
decided. Okay.
thought that it's gonna even be, because the first year funding, we didn't have any communities identified. I think there's a thought that as we get going, that the communities will be prioritized a little better. There'll be even more focused spending in those focused communities. How it gets split amongst the districts, whether it's by population or by community or by need, that's
How do you
the question.
quantify it?
What,
Well, the original proposal to last year was just directly to the districts on the percentage. This one is going to CARB, and then basically they would allocate it with priority, as you said, to the communities identified under AB 617, but it includes mobile and stationary funding.
We're trying not to have it, well, I don't know what
I
our
was
official
gonna ask
position is.
what is the district's ask? I mean, what
We're not even there yet. We're not even there yet. We're supportive of the 250, and we're supportive of much more than the 250. But we are also supportive of them being a little more flexible on the way the money.
We're not giving up those chickens that haven't hatched yet.
I guess the reason I'm asking is I would imagine that, obviously when communities get chosen, there are large investments that need to be made to do monitoring or whatever needs to be done in those communities. So not that would just be a grant given to communities, but that it would pay for the work that needs to be done for the communities.
The 250 is primarily for getting emission reductions through incentive programs or however else you can do it. The 5 million is for community engagement.
Right.
The hopefully 27, hopefully 75 million is for districts to have the resources to monitor and have
Include staff and monitoring equipment and capabilities. Bill?
Yeah, I guess it was last Friday at the board meeting, or stationary source board meeting. I saw a list on a list of cities on one of the slides, and it looked like there must have been 2 or 3 dozen in there.
Oh, there were at least that, right?
It's in your pack.
Is that your ask?
That's the preliminary consideration list that was sent to ARB, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's just a very, very, very preliminary list.
That's right.
And then
Get to
was ARB and you all talking about maybe 2 or 3 per year or something like that? I mean, we're
I'm sure Kurt's going to hit on some of this when we get to his item.
Go ahead and cover it if you want.
Go ahead and cover it. We're talking years of work here, right?
So nobody knows the exact answer to that. What CARB has been saying is statewide, maybe 5 to 10 or up to 10 in the first year. Statewide, we would expect, given our population and our disadvantaged community count, that we're going to have, if there's 10, we would at least have 4 in year 1. And so that's what we're trying to plan for, and that's without money, that's very difficult to do.
Sure.
But this list that went to CARB asked for a very preliminary list of all the communities that are under consideration by the end of April. So our list is there's no priority there. There's no ordering. We're going through that process now of trying to rank and prioritize communities.
And they also have a self-nomination process.
There's a self-nomination process to us. There's a self-nomination process to CARB. We're all communicating on all those self-nominations. So by June Stationary Source Committee, we hope to have a report, a draft report that's going to go to CARB with our recommendations.
From that list.
Is
that
after the board? I mean, is that going to go to the list? Going to go to the board first?
The board will go, in July.
In July, and then it would come.
And then, but we're going to do another round of outreach and get feedback towards the end of May, beginning of June, to make our June Stationary Source Committee.
Again, you've got communities pitted against each other, but again, that's the way it is. It's a little odd. But eventually, with enough time, we'd hope you get to all of them that are in need.
And nobody should take that list literally, because we could be splitting communities, combining communities, adding communities, taking communities off. Like this is just so CARB has a sense of how many are out there.
Is it a merit system, or is it who sits on the board? Who's at the table to allocate for it?
It'll eventually be a board decision at both the AQMD level and the CARB level.
But you didn't answer the first question. Is it a merit system, or is it who sits
All
on
we
the
can
table?
do is make recommendations. So we're going to make recommendations based on some data sources that we have, like looking at actual risk based on monitoring, based on our other work that we've done. Also looking at recommendations.
So it's a risk assessment. It's going to be a risk assessment.
Not purely, that's one factor.
I'm hearing the
Yeah, Kurt's got
There's
a couple pages for
a
you.
2-page handout from CARB that explains the selection process. It's on the table.
So, yeah. It's fairly
And
systematic.
schedules in there as well. So look at these.
In an objective, subjective manner.
systematic doesn't have to be objective. Philip, do you have anything else?
No, that's in the
We exhausted?
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone else have any comments or questions on the phone? Our member of the public does have one. Please come up, Susan.
So it's probably premature, but when you were saying maybe 4 communities could be chosen down here, those would be split between the monitoring and the emission reduction plans, or is too premature for that?
Premature. Let us know your comments and suggestions.
Well.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Now we get to move to the subcommittee reports, and eventually under item 8C gets occurred. But we start with freight sustainability, which is Dan.
Okay, just a few items. So last week, governing board members, the district took action on the indirect source rules, facility-based measures, and I wasn't at the meeting, but my understanding is under the development. What do they got? Yeah, I guess development and redevelopment. They were going to look at more cost data, delay rulemaking, look at more cost impact data, and bring that back. The airport was to look at an MOU approach and do voluntary reductions. The port was to just right now work with their clean air action plan. Rail yards was to move forward with regulatory activity, but incorporate board member Rutherford into ongoing negotiations and try and maybe get some voluntary or less painful participation. The warehouses, they voted to move forward with those also, to do, again, more analysis and economic impact and such. Anybody else can add to that? That's what I have. Additionally, there was the ACT Expo last week, and they, among other things, rolled out the Cummins low NOx engine, and I think AJR trucking bought, was it 20 units? Vehicles? I think they were getting 2 or 3.
They had one.
One,
getting,
yeah, I think.
getting the rest.
Yeah, so that's out now, and we'll begin hitting the road.
UPS had one that they took off the road to display at the show, and then Freightliner had one also. That was, well, UPS one was a Freightliner one too. So I saw 3 of them.
Okay, the other items, Caltrans is starting its work to update the California Freight Mobility Plan. There's actually going to be a meeting here on May 17th, public workshop. And they're following that, and I think they've already held one, but there's also what they're calling focus group meetings. And those are being held around the state. There's 2 that are down in this neck of the woods. There'll be one in San Bernardino on May 17th and another one in Paramount on the 18th. Those look like they're focusing on industry participation and compact or input. They're looking to get motor carriers there, warehouse operators, manufacturers, ag producers, and other industry participants. I'm sure they'll go in and get public comment also. I know at the last effort, I think they had done something through Craigslist to go out and get public comment. So, but I'm sure that will be coming up too. But these meetings are starting up, and they are looking at including stuff like, as I think the previous California Transportation Plan, bringing in the greenhouse gas and sustainability stuff. It is an opportunity, I think, for engagement with trying to look at infrastructure. And I think what ultimately comes out of this is SCAG and others develop projects, right, that then move forward, and hopefully we can get federal funding as well. Let's see. And then the California Freight Advisory Plan Committee is meeting on May 30th at the Port of Long Beach. That's a 10 to 4:30 p.m. meeting. They're asking for RSVPs by May 15th, and they are going to have a breakout session on the California Freight Mobility Plan.
What was the date of that?
That's May 30th. That's it.
Small business considerations, Bill?
Oh, yeah. Well, since my last report, we've been very intimately involved in the rule development process of proposed rule 1469 and the detrimental and very real aspects of the rule.
Do you have the decorative chrome platers as members? Good.
Well, the Metal Finishing Association is an alliance member. So.
Yeah, but they tend to be the hard chrome aerospace ones, at least according to.
No,
they represent deck chrome too. Not all.
Yeah, they're a mixture. What you were hearing Friday was, of course, largely is concerned by the entire industry. Some of those people are definitely going to go out of business. But you were hearing some of the challenges made by those people who plate against mil specs and or NASA specs or FDA specifications. Because you have to bear in mind they're job shops; they're not manufacturers, so they take what comes in the door. But anyway, we've been participating in that. We've also been participating in the reclaim transition process. And to that point, we held a seminar or workshop on May 2nd. Southern California Gas Company was nice enough to host it. We had involvement with WISPA, and we had around 25 reclaim facilities there. It was a 2-hour event. We explained and I guess I should say we had York Engineering as a presenter, and also Ramble Environ, and then of course Southern California Gas was a
must have lost my invitation.
Pardon me?
I must have lost my invitation. I'm joking.
I'm sorry, we'll invite you to the next one. You know,
my office.
You may not remember it, Philip, but when this first started, at the very first meeting, I raised the question or the issue that, you know, there was a lot of really pertinent information that was being discussed. And as you looked around, there were a lot of people in GB, but everybody wasn't there, and not everybody has been coming. That's not your fault. You send the invitations out, but my concern was for the smaller facilities, and this transition represents, you know, some very real decisions that these people, not just their operations people, but their finance people, their boards of directors have to make, or will have to make in the imminent future. So we had a very robust discussion on a number of elements pertaining to the transition process, and people came away with the feedback was extremely positive. So whether or not we have another one, I don't know, but I think this was a long time coming. So.
Sounds like a good idea. Okay, Kurt, EJ and 617 implementation.
Yeah, well, CARB has put out a 2-page explainer, as they called it, on how they're going to go about selecting the first round of communities for the AB 617 community clean air plans and the monitoring. So, I mean, I'm not going to read it. You guys can read it. This is basically they've got they'll do an assessment that's based on exposure to air pollution, sensitive populations, and other measures of vulnerability to air pollution in the communities that are the ones provided them through the final submittal by the air districts. And at that, using that process, they will prioritize which communities will be the first ones to have the program implemented in. This will be updated every year, and presumably, additional communities then will be added, and the program will march forward. I also had Ann print out for everybody who was interested to have today. This is the submittal that South Coast District provided to CARB, identifying first off, outlining the process that the district went through in identifying the preliminary list of communities and containing the list of communities that have been identified in this initial stage. As Phil said, there will be probably additional communities that will self-nominate themselves onto this list, or additional communities that the district may want to add. But by the end of July, it's going to have to be trimmed down, or at least prioritized with some type of ranking order, or certain levels of these are the tiering, probably is a better word for it. For the final, it will go to the governing board, I guess in July, right, for the board to make the final approval of the list, and then it will be sent on to CARB, which will then take that list and make the final determinations as to where it will be, the implementation will begin. And as one of the things they point out in this 2-page explainer is they want it to be regional. They want regional diversity, so there will be solutions in multiple air districts. It won't all just be concentrated in one district. So I'm sure we can expect Bay Area and San Joaquin and South Coast will be probably well represented.
I came across, I guess in my email box, Rosheng, I don't know if you know anything about this, but SCAG has established an environmental justice program for, I think it might be related to the RTP and Sustainable Cities program, right?
Yes, we do. Actually, I think there is a first meeting. I can forward the information to you. I know there's
I've got it a few times already, but if others are interested in it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention.
Yes, we do have EJ.
Yeah, since we're updating on subcommittees, and this one has to do with environmental justice, and also I noticed that the California Public Utilities Commission is establishing an environmental justice advisory group. So more and more sort of EJ advisory groups and EJ processes taking place at other agencies too, and we should probably stay informed about those. So David's not here. Climate change activities, anyone have anything on that subject? No? Everywhere else, that's all people talk about. All right, any other questions or comments in general on the subcommittee status reports? None? Public comment? Oh, you already got your public comment in, right? Okay. A report to and from Stationary Committee from Dr. Fine.
Yeah, real fast. Most people remembering back to Stationary Resource Committee last month. Full agenda. We talked about 1111 coming back to the board to maybe have a few more labeling requirements as directed by Dr. Parker. We also talked about 1146. We were going to set hearing last week, but the board extended that, so we're still deciding when we're going to come back to the Stationary Resource Committee on 1146. 1469, we gave an update on that. We talked about this AB 617 identification process. Coming up next week, again, preliminary agenda. It's pretty light as of now. I don't know if we're going to add anything else, but right now we're just coming back on some more detail on 1111 because we'll have that rule language available. So that's all we have right now, but it doesn't mean something won't get added between today and Friday.
Art?
I don't know whether to bring it up. Is it other business or are we in public comments?
We are on stationary stores. We're on 9 right now, but we'll be at 10 very soon, I think. Anyone other comments or questions for Phil? Okay, so 10 is other business, which means anything that's not on the agenda for committee members have an interest in making a comment about. Was there something you had?
Yeah, we have a statewide, I'm on a school board and there's like 5,000 members, 1,100 school districts. We're probably the largest entity of employers in the state. And again, we take care of about a third of the population. Everybody from pre-K through 12. We have a convention coming up. It's San Francisco. It's the California School Boards Association. And my suggestion would be to contact them about maybe setting up a workshop, because I think you need to develop that partnership. When you look at sustainable cities and those programs, we work with the National Association of Latino Elected Officials to bring Latino elected officials together to combine policies, and we're now building partnerships in facilities, infrastructures, combining our resources and monies.
So it's in September, you said, in Sacramento?
We have a convention every year. Sometimes we have it in San Diego, and this year we have it in San Francisco. So it's a nice place to have a convention. So you would have it there, but I know they're planning out the convention, and I think it would be if you had a workshop on Prop 39, what other type of initiatives, and then also from the other, you would be able to develop maybe more programs that would embrace and enlarge your stakeholders and footprints that will help you also in Sacramento sustain this entity.
Raised with CAPCOA as to whether or not, right, school bus program incentive funding, air quality monitoring, what other
solar and that thing, because just to educate people on, because it was off. For me, I already had everything lined up, and then this policy comes through on the rate change from Edison and others to change the hours.
Yeah.
That I lost. I had 3 or 4 school sites that were ready to go for solar, and I was only able to move 2 through Anaheim because I wasn't able to get sufficient votes on my board.
Joe, can you talk to Wayne about that?
Yeah, it would be helpful. Art, can you send me some information about the
School Boards Association?
No, about the specific
website.
conference, about the conference.
You can look it up. They have a website.
Well, you didn't give me specifics enough.
California School Board Association.
California School.
Yeah, they have like 5,000, 4,000 people attend.
But it seems to me like it would be better for CAPCOA because all the other.
I think what you want to do is statewide and it's regional. Yeah. So when you're looking at pushing legislation and such, because people move from those to assemblymen to councilmen and such, you start building that culture and that awareness of the type of policies that you guys want to change.
Okay, great. Thanks, Art, for bringing that up. Any other business? None?
Yes, I do.
Oh, we have some.
That's
okay. Don't worry about
it. I'm reading a press release in regards to the SCAQMD initiates the advisory council to engage young adults. I'm sure you guys are aware of that, hopefully.
Yes.
If you guys are not on the board, it's online. The board approved to launch the Young Youth Advisory Council to engage young adults to take part in the Clean Air South Coast Basin. I think that's a step in regards to me constantly asking for outreach and training for younger adults to learn about what actually you guys and we do here and what we learn. Also, as the chair, I'm asking you, Dr. Luke, can you please add an item on this agenda like we had before a couple years ago, as far as to related to outreach in disadvantaged communities, what you guys are actually doing, So sometimes when I do my online research here on your website, it's kind of hard to find things. And this just happened to pop out to me today because it was on the front page of
Sure.
your website.
So why don't we put that on the agenda for the next meeting to have Public Affairs come and talk about outreach activities?
Okay.
Be helpful.
Thank you. That's it. Thank
Okay.
you. Good start.
Is that really appropriate? Because there's not a lot of young people here in this home rule advisory.
We are open to adding young people.
Yeah.
And you notice that
Well,
there
somebody
is
needs to
no
pick us up
old
before we
person
have a heart
advisory.
attack. Someone's gotta have the strength.
I just want to say I was fortunate enough to go to the first meeting of this group, and it is such an impressive group of young people, and they are just so energetic and so passionate, and we're going to be able to use them to get a lot of good information and a lot of good ideas.
They're not as jaded as the rest of us.
Wait till life smacks them down.
Well, I hope it doesn't, because it's just the energy in the room was amazing, and they've got some really good ideas.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's good. I got a 20-year-old that came on my board. Youngest elected official in the state.
Wow.
Wow.
At first conference, he couldn't drink.
Okay. Now, we're gonna get off of other business, unless we have any other business, and go to public comment. Anyone with any public comments during public comment? Anyone on the phone, have anyone there with any public comments? Speak now. Okay, well, then we are going to adjourn until July 11th at 10 a.m. here at CCA. And please help yourself to lunch. And thank you very much. Thank you, everyone on the phone. We're going to be hanging up.